My name is Sharbendu De. I'm a lens-based artist, academic and a writer. I live in New Delhi. Essentially, I do photography, but my style is I do constructed photographic approaches rather than the documentary ones. I had started by following and strongly believing in the documentary approach. However, over the period of time, I have graduated to the more conceptual approaches. I build these sets. I work with indigenous communities and I'm working on the climate crisis. The way I photograph is very research heavy, and then there are scenes that are decided. There's a script that's detailed out. Through my practice, I'm kind of countering the decisive moment. That there is no single decisive moment per se. With regard to Imagine Homeland, the series that is being exhibited over there now, I think the aesthetics came to me rather than me arriving at the aesthetic. I spent about 7 years in the making of Imagine Homeland. But in 2013, when I had started, I went with a very linear approach. I started photographing using the documentary approach, trying to capture these decisive moments as Henri Cartier-Bresson had made famous once upon a time. But gradually, I started to realize that the images are not working, they're not evoking that feeling. The images are once again turning into a story of poverty porn, which I'm strongly opposed to. That's primarily the way the West has seen India and Indians, with this very problematic colonial gaze, exoticizing us. And then I realized that I was doing the same. I knew that my approach is not working. So I started tapping into art history. My interaction with the community member. They live inside a dense forest, and so living inside a dense forest, completely cut off from the rest of the world. I had no phone connection, I had no internet, I had no electricity, I had no access to what was happening in the outside, so-called modern, urban, monetized world. So for months and months, when you are living in a completely different space, in a completely different time zone, I think it starts to affect you. Plus, the philosophy of the Lisu community members, there are many things that happened in the forest which is not easy to explain within the ambit of rationale, with logic. So I started to see things beyond logic, to use the philosophy of the Lisu people, all the things that they told me over the years, along with my own interpretation of their stories, whilst trying to avoid the poverty porn. There's no point in just showing things the way they are. The world already knows. The world today has been photographed. So what's the point of me showing to you or our audiences the same thing that they've seen ad nauseum? If my work cannot take them to a new place, or it cannot encourage or compel them to think differently or to question their own belief systems, then what good is art for? I believe that's how gradually I eventually arrived at that aesthetic. My history has two key aspects. I was trained in journalism, so I follow the journalistic approach of how to reach out to people, how to communicate, or even the interviewing techniques. It's very fact and information based. So that's one strand. The other strand of my career has been I started with working in the not-for-profit sector. Especially, I started with working in natural disasters as an emergency responder. These two things, I believe, over the years have guided my approach. Now, what do I mean by that? So, it always starts with research using a journalistic process. So, all the fact and information gathering happens. Interviews with the community. So what do they have to say? What do they feel? At the end of the day, I'm still an outsider. And photography, as long as it's tied to the representational politics, there has to be a sense of responsibility. But once the information is there, and then I arrive at these ideas that I want to evoke. For example, in Imagine Homeland, we don't see people doing anything specific. They're sitting, they're waiting. There's a father with his daughter sitting in the middle of a stream, just on a bench, just together. Or there's a man who's sitting in the middle of a forest playing a board game with a swan all by himself. These are to evoke feelings of loneliness, but also to evoke feelings of companionship. What is the relationship of a father with his daughter? Or the image of the man with his 3 children and 2 ducks watching television. There is an absence of the mother. Why is the mother absent? Why are they in the middle of a forest? Why are they sitting together watching television in a forest? So many of these things have come on the basis of the quality of their life. For instance, healthcare facilities are not there, and so there's a high mortality rate. So there are many loved ones of the Lisu people that go missing. They lose to preventable diseases. And so I'm trying to bring in this feeling of someone is missing from the ideal definition of a family, which is a father, a mother, children, a dog, a cat, or a pet, something like that. And one member is missing. It's to evoke the question why? What happened to the mother figure? I'm trying to bring in this aspect that is the parental feeling endemic only to women? Do men not make good fathers, good parents? And there in the Lisu world, I saw men to be amazing parents, along with the mothers, but amazing tenderness. And it's through years of observation that feelings of grace, gentleness, that these started entering my frame, that this is what the story is about. Now, further, how do I make it is so I arrive at these ideas that what do I want to say? And what do I want to say comes from what the community has told me and what I've observed. But something very strange happens in these forests is every year, whenever I spend time over there, I get a lot of dreams. And many of these scenes that have appeared in Imagined Homeland have actually appeared to me in my dream state. And so I would suddenly get up in the middle of the night at 2 or 3 in the night when we are camping or we are in the forest, and then I'm writing down the idea. The next morning I call in a meeting for my entire team members and discuss the idea with them, and I ask them, is this possible? And if that's possible, then one team member goes arranging the props, another goes helping location, another goes looking for community members who will be willing to come and sit for this particular image. So that's a bit of a detailed approach, and each image, in a week roughly, I end up making just about 2 images max. Well, I would say the inspiration comes from the community members, the Lisus, from their stories of their life, their hardships, their grace, their gentleness, their extreme sense of dignity, extreme sense of belonging and caring for one another. I noticed many qualities in them which today are very rare in our urban societies, and that majorly inspired me. Otherwise, it was not easy to work on a project like this over 7 years, where one has to trek for 3 to 5 days through the forest to reach their villages. You're completely cut off from everything. It's tough terrain. Now, in terms of artists that have inspired me, there are quite a few, but they have inspired me at different stages in my life. There was a point in time that I was very much inspired by Henri Cartier-Bresson, also known as the father of modern photojournalism. It's only over the decades that I've started to question that father of modern photojournalism of where. It's very Euro and the West centric. It kind of homogenizes the whole world. So when this political understanding started to develop, then my references started to shift. My inspiration started to shift. Very consistently, there's been this one photographer that I've always been very inspired with, and that's Duane Michaels. And the philosophy that he promotes is a photograph that just shows the physicality of someone. I have looked at many painters, I've looked at filmmakers, and more than an artist's work, I always try to look at their philosophy. The reason behind that is when I'm looking at someone's work and I'm getting inspired by it, there's osmosis. All of that specificity of that artwork and that style gets fed into my brain. I start making work like that. And the moment my work starts to look like that of someone else, then I'm making a facsimile. It's nothing original. However, I'm very inspired and influenced by the philosophy of Andrei Tarkovsky, the filmmaker. I'm quite influenced and motivated by the films of Alejandro Jodorowsky. And if you see, they're always going beyond the realm of logic. Within photographers, there's been Gauri Gill, there's been Ravi Agarwal, there's been Dayanita Singh that I've looked up to, each for their own philosophy and approaches. I quite follow the work of Gregory Crutzen and Jeff Wall. Those are the kind of people I'm looking at. I enjoy showing my work, and I enjoy the opportunity to engage with audiences through the platform of an exhibition. Of course, I have my own ambitions, I have my dreams as an artist. I want my work to be seen by many, and I want my work to be exhibited in the important institutions across the world, but that will happen in due time. In the meanwhile, we have to live. We are here and we are alive right now, not in the future. I want to go and live closer to the mountain, closer to the forest. This year, in fact, the next week, I'm headed to a mountain state in the Himalayas. I'll be going and spending a month, and after that, I'm going to spend the rest of the year over there. I'm starting to work on a different project, but I hope to find my way back to nature. That's where I want to live, in equanimity, with a decent balance between modernity, but also being closer to nature, not living in a hyper capitalized material world. Their belief in Mamimu, I would not say that it's a reality. And we say it's a belief because they or I cannot prove it. Because if it could have been proven, we would have said it's a fact. The Lisu people do believe in it. They don't talk about it often. I did not come across as them being superstitious ever in the 7 years that I've worked with them. But they believe in the existence of Mamim and Mice. Mamim is this parallel invisible world coexisting in the same time-space continuum, which means that just around us, in some corner of your apartment or in your neighborhood, there might be a place where mice are the invisible dwellers of the Mamim. So the people who live there in that world called Mamim, but we cannot see. Now, this is what they believe in. It could also be a philosophical way of accepting loss, that when somebody goes missing in the dense forest and there is no trace, so where have they gone? And within the limitations of logic, when they cannot find any traces, then perhaps they would say they've gone to Mamim, to the other world. So Mamim can have multiple interpretations. They do not see it in a superstitious manner. So how do they see it, or how can this be seen, and how does it help us who don't live in the Lisu world, who live in an urban monetized world where we are suffering from this alienation from nature? What this philosophy does, it says that there are others who exist, that our intellectual faculties might not be able to see. But just because we are not able to see does not mean that they don't exist. What capitalism and compounded with colonialism has done is it has turned nature into inert. That nature is passive, nature has no agency. As a result of which it became easier to take capitalism much forward, much faster. What a philosophy like this does is it subverts this whole notion. It encourages us to again rethink and believe that nature is not inert. Nature is alive. And in the forest of Namdafa, where I've spent time, I have had experiences where I saw nature alive. So after a point in time, every time when I was going inside the forest, I would pray to the forest, asking for its protection, saying that I come with good intent. I am not strong enough to endure the hardship of this forest. The Lisu people are, the locals are, I am not. Please protect me. Please take care of me. I come with good intent. And I've always been protected. I've had very mystical experiences, which is very difficult to explain, but I've had experiences where I've been made to strongly, in my awakened state, not in my sleep state, I have experienced strange events which cannot be explained. And I've spoken to the Lisu people and they say, okay, so you saw it, we have it all the time. So the forests are really alive. In India, in Hindu philosophy, we believe in this existence of spirit forces. Now, if we look at it anthropologically, for example, Eduardo Cohn, a professor who teaches at, I believe, at McGraw-Hill University in Canada, he's written this book, How Forests Think. In that book, he argues that the anthropology of man cannot be complete without taking into account the space around that person, because that space goes on to constitute who this person or this community is and what they believe in. And his research work was on a South American tribe, and he speaks of, in anthropological studies, one even has to take into account the existence of these spirit forces that might be invisible, but they do exist and they influence the psyche of the people who live there. So Mamem and Maise is a concept. I don't know if it is real or not, but there are stories over there. I have a very good friend of mine. His family, there is a story that his uncle went missing. So they don't say it often, They don't like to talk about this too much with outsiders. With me, over the years, we've become friends and there's a strong relationship now. They've shared some of these things, and I believe it's my responsibility now to articulate it and put it in the appropriate context. I would encourage all of us to look at this as a philosophy where they believe that just because we cannot see something does not mean it doesn't exist. They also have agency, they have energy, they have spirit, they have will, they have consent. And so we need to start respecting nature and the non human, non visible agents who cohabit in these spaces. Well, the first time that I went to the Lisu community, I went there very selfishly looking for a story to work on and to publish, to get a byline and to further my career. I did not go with any long-term plans. I was like, I'm going there, I'm going to have some fun, I'm going to trek inside the dense national park, I'm going to meet a community, an indigenous community who still live inside the forest, far removed from a monetized economy. I think I was looking for some cheap thrill at a point in time to make a little bit of money and to progress his career. After the first experience, I came back and I was like, okay, I'm done. Their stories somehow stayed alive in my head and it became stronger and stronger. The stories of their loss. And there were stories of 7 members in the family died, the wife died, the children died, the husband died, and this died, and that person died. And nobody cared. Nobody cares. In India, until recently, very few people knew about the existence of this community. But what got me was not their suffering, but their grace, their gentleness, their sense of pride, their sense of compassion. Despite so much suffering, I started to question, where do these qualities come from? And so that got me to focus on and keep going back to photographing the Lisu people. Well, I was supposed to be there with you all. I wish I could have made it there. It would have been fun. What I particularly really like is the philosophy of the outdoor exhibit. It's also very political because it brings art out of these white cube spaces and makes it more accessible. It creates a context for people to walk around nature, to walk around outdoor. And so I'm really glad about this festival and I'm glad that I'm a part of this. I'm really glad that I could show my work in that kind of a setting. And it also inspires us to look at our work in more non-linear manner, to see how can Imagine Homeland and my other works be curated across different contexts. And that is very important. And I thank you all for that. Thank you.